We'll go to item 1526, which is the Iluka Reserve item in the items for information, 1526 on page 270. Is there any questions arising from the report that was there, or any matters that need to be raised? I'll see if there are any questions, Councillor Riley. Any questions? No questions. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I can get a second to the motion, is that Council defers any further activity with regard to Iluka Reserve and the residential land around it until after the September Council elections. And if I can get a seconder for that, I'll explain myself.
Are there any seconders? Councillor Rice, you'll second that. Thank you. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, there seems to be a lot of unanswered questions regarding what has happened to Iluka, and even more what should happen. It's my belief that if Council should want to sell off land, there should be a business case. There should be extensive community engagement, and I think most people would agree with that. We're talking about going to a gateway process, and I think that's fine, but before we do that, we need a lot more engagement. I believe that community engagement is a bit like a ladder, and I think we're kind of on the bottom rung, which is good. We're talking about informing people, but we're not talking about engaging people, and I think that needs to happen. I think to get things into some kind of perspective, we should include all stakeholders, and I think we need to repress this button, the reset button, before actions overtake us and we're caught in a maelstrom of allegations for which we have no real satisfactory answer. I think we've got to go back to the start with this, and I don't think it needs to be a terribly long process, but I think at the moment I'm very nervous that Council hasn't taken the steps that are fully engaging the residents around that area, and we don't have a very clear business case. We don't know what we want to do and why we want to do it.
Councillor Riley, I accept the arguments, but I disagree with your commentary regarding the steps we've taken so far. I believe that the council has attempted to speak to the people, and there is a formal process before the gateway proposal. Even that is the proposal that it has to go through community land applications and so on. And I don't think the council has at any time not been prepared to provide the information or to give the information that we have to hand. But the point is we can't really proceed with anything unless we have some sort of idea of what we want to do, and that was what we had to go through. As you recall, there was issues relating to what was the reserve made of. Was it old fill? Was there a garbage dump? Was there other materials? Is it solid base? Apparently it's been different things over the years. So I think from that point of view, we have been going through the process quite clearly with the people, and we've provided everything that's been asked for that we have to hand. And there are processes we have to go through. We saw in Gerringong that going in with just a blank sheet left you with no answers to anything. We have to have a base to start from, seems to me.
Yeah, look, Mr Mayor, look, I accept what you're saying, and I think that Council has probably acted, totally correctly, but I don't think they've acted totally enthusiastically in engaging the population. I do take your point that we can't just put up a blank sheet of paper. We need to know what's there and so on, and I think that should include getting information not only from what's under the soil, but what the people think who live around it. They may have ideas that we haven't even considered. Sure. Okay. So I just think it's an idea to put it up there, reset the thing, and start it on a much firmer basis.
Okay. Councillor Steele?
Yes, yes, Mayor, I'd like to speak against the motion. Firstly, I feel that we have got a business case. If these blocks are sold, I believe they will give us a positive $2 million that we will make out of this. Listening to the speaker last night, I just feel it's very much a case of NIMBY, not in my backyard. And if they realise where we're going to put the 10 blocks, it's not going to affect the park at all. But even so, the park's never used. I've lived here 35, 40 years, I don't know, and I don't think I've never seen it used. So I can't see there's an argument. I feel we've dragged on this one. I think that we as a councillor and the officers, due respects, this has taken too long already. These should have been up and sold. So I'm totally against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Rice, I think, seconded the motion. Would you like to speak?
Okay. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak. I'm interested that I did ask after meeting with some of the residents that we gave those residents a copy of the draft plan, and I think it would be quite useful if we did have some sort of community consultation with reference to that draft plan before we go any further. We could distribute it to those who live around the park, so perhaps we could have it available online for people who live in the vicinity. Very early in the stage, when we were talking about Iluka Reserve, I asked a handful of people that I knew that lived in the area. I didn't know the people in the immediate vicinity of the park until recently through the Facebook group they started. But amongst those who I asked, who I knew, there was really mixed ideas about what could be done with that park. A lot of them said, yes, anything that made that park usable would be fantastic. And now I've been living down in that area for 19 years now, and the park has always been the same. And I've looked at the park and thought, well, it would be really nice if it had some seating, if it had some shade, if it had some pathways, if it had some facilities that made it usable. And a lot of other people felt the same too. But I think until we can start a discussion amongst the neighbours about what would result in the park and what are the possibilities, we can't really determine which way to go.
Thank you. Councillor, I think Councillor Sloan was next. Yes.
I've got a question for the Director, Mr Mayor, about the planning process and also the draft concept plan that was passed out. I'm just wondering whether during the planning process that we are talking about initiating, that concept plan would be up for discussion through that process. Would there be more consultation on that design?
Through Mr Mayor, it's basically a gateway process, but it's a reclassification of the land. So in addition to the exhibition of whatever documentation goes forward, and that can include the future plans and designs for the parkland and any residential area, there's also a public hearing. So that's in addition to any level of public consultation.
Two inquiries.
So there's actually two avenues there, and council can put forward whatever documentation it desires during that process.
And must have a public meeting and must take account of the public submissions in both cases. Thank you, Councillor Way.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking against the motion. Like some of my colleagues here, I go past that practically every day for the last 30 or 40 years, and except for the odd person walking a dog, I've never seen it being used. And I'll try and keep this brief. We did have a meeting where a few of us councillors did go out and speak to him, and I spoke to the group and I told them that I was supporting what council were doing, and I think we're going down the right process. And right from the get-go, there was we've said to the managing director, general manager, we want to go down this path and looking at getting some extra funds that we can spend around the place. And when I spoke down there too, and I said, well, you can have a big playground down there instead of just a vacant block. There seemed to be some sort of recognition, looking at other things. The other point was half the people there were worried from the southeast end were worried about drainage problems more than anything else, and in a general conversation basically said, well, if we do a plan of this will be an opportunity to spend money down there for the whole project and fix those drainage problems. And I did make some comments on Facebook about it, and they all a lot of them seem to drop off. So the main complaints do really come from some of the people along that back fence sort of scenario that was referred to earlier, and I think we look like, I think it's 9 blocks, and we look like making around 1.5 million. We have a lot of projects where we can invest that money and come back to the community, and I think that council are going down the right track, and we want to get feedback from the community, and through this process that we've engaged, we will, and we'll have, as as you did mention, with Gerringong, we should have had more up front so people could see what was exactly going to happen, and I'd like to see something happen with that area.
Thank you. Councillor Honey, I think, is next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question, and it's a question, is about the process. In fact, the process to this stage appears that it is out of kilter. Perhaps the concept design of a subdivision on land that was actually at that stage not zoned for subdivision was a bit premature, and that perhaps the motion should read that we expedite the proposal, the planning proposal, so that then that information that we have on a concept design can come into play. At the moment, we've got a concept design on a piece of community land, which is you can't have a concept design on community land because you can't change it.
Well, that's why it is a concept plan. Yeah.
So really, what we should be doing is getting that planning proposal through as quickly as we can, so that then we can introduce a concept plan, so that the people are able to see what is going on.
Well, that plan,
and they do have two opportunities then to have their say on whether or not they're happy with that concept plan. So I think really, rather, I'm against the motion because I think that as soon as we get that planning proposal approved, then we can go to the people and get the input, and then we can make a decision on the final plan of that subdivision.
I think, yes, I think I understand where you're coming from. You're saying get the discussion on the proposal to change it from community land underway. Is that what you're saying? And yes, the point I'd make is simply that because of the nature of the land, if you recall, the discussions that were held early on were that we didn't know whether any of it could be salvageable in the sense that you could build homes on it because of we don't know what was the nature of the fill that may have gone in there, and that's why that was tested, and there we found the areas around the back. So the concept plan arose from that. That's all it is at the moment, but it probably is enough to go on with to proceed to the other things. All right, I take your point. Councillor, any other questions or matters?
I've just got a question about the feasibility of having that plan, the draft plan, now available to the community. Is there any reason why we can't have that available? We haven't given it to everybody, though. We've given it to some neighbours, I gather, but it's not available to the people who all are in a reasonable
I can't see any problem with that.
Range. Because I think that would help the case a lot too if the whole neighbourhood there knew what was being considered.
We've got to go through
I don't think they have all seen
We have got to go through a process, though, two processes, which involve community consultation. Councillor Riley, you had your light on?
Just to write a reply.
Okay, yes, all right, okay. Any other questions or matters to arise? Councillor Riley, it's in your hands.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I don't think that's an amendment because it seems to be directly against the motion. The motion is to defer, and the amendment is to.
Yes, I don't think. I didn't accept an amendment. No, it's only the motion before us at the moment.
Look, we have a draft plan, and I think that we are victims of our own cognitive bias. And that is that we've all thought that this is going to be going through without any problems, and somewhere in the past, but none of us were 100% sure, that we have consulted with the community and the community's on side 100% and we're going to do this. And as we've come closer to the process, we've realised that 11 years ago we consulted with the community with regard to the LEP process, and it wasn't real consultation. It was the plan was put out for public exhibition. That's not consultation. That's just showing them. That's putting a plan out on exhibition. A big difference, I feel. The other thing is that with the draft plan, as we've moved closer, there has been no consultation on the draft plan. The only reason that the people have it, Warren, is that they were asked for it. They weren't given it. They had to ask for it. As a matter of fact, the residents of that area asked for a GIPA report, and the time had expired for that. Legally expired before this council provided that information. I wonder why that delay was. It had gone days and days and days and days after the GIPA legislation. Luckily, the residents are on side and people in Claymore like the council, so they didn't do anything more about it. But when they received the information, they found that there was hardly any public consultation at all. And what I'm saying, and what I'm urging my councillors to do, is if you believe the public consultation has been done and adequately, there shouldn't be any problems. Let's just take another step and let them share in the draft concept plan. They're the ones that are going to have to wake up every morning next to this place. I think they want to use that land. At the moment, it's totally unusable for them. A lot of people do use the land, Mark. I'm sorry to say. I drive past there quite often. I go to Wollongong that way nearly every day, and I see people kicking balls in there and playing tennis on there, and I think Councillor Rice's children learned to play tennis on the tennis court. Is that...
That's not the park.
No, of course, it's part of the park. It's part of the park, the tennis court. The other thing is that how do we here sit with the idea of saying, well, we've had a community that's put a big investment in us, but we're going to tell them what we want to do. We're not going to ask them what they want. And I want to put this off to give them a chance, give the people who live there and have to wake up next door to this thing every day a chance for input. And I don't think that's too hard. And if their input is valuable, it might be a better plan, might be a better draft plan than what we've got. Then we submit that to the gateway process. Where's the harm in that?
Thank you. All right, we'll put it to the vote. We'll need a show of hands on this. Yes, need a show of hands. Those in favour of the motion that you see on the board before you, please raise your hand. Those against, declare it lost. I just point out that plan, I think you're right. I think that plan has been made available. We've not hidden it, and it can be made available if people want it. We'll make sure we get publicity. All right, we move back to
just
item...
continuing that, Mr Mayor, for a moment. If we're going to make it available, can we advertise it and have it available online then?
No, we'll make it available, Councillor Rice, and go through the formal processes. That's what we'll do.
Available in just for...
We'll make it available to the immediate neighbours, and we'll make it available publicly. And that's the end of the matter.
I'm just sorry, can I just understand by what you mean by publicly?
We'll make it available for people to come and get a copy, and we'll make it available by sending it to all the neighbours nearby.
Okay, because I think the whole neighbourhood would appreciate having a look at that plan.
Yes, they can do that.
Good.
We'll give it to the precinct too, the minimum ratepayers, I think, which is the nearest organisation. All right, we'll move back to item 9.